Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. Today, we're joined by Gabriel Reilich, a visionary storyteller, strategist, and content creator whose work has helped redefine what uplifting media can be. As the head of content and innovation at Upworthy, Gabe has led campaigns that inspire millions by amplifying human goodness and sparking positive change. His journey from graduating with honors at UC Berkeley to shaping viral campaigns for global nonprofits and major brands to co-authoring the New York Times best-selling book, Good People, Stories from the Best of Humanity, has been fueled by one consistent mission, using creativity to make the world a little bit brighter. Gabe is more than just a media leader. He's also an advocate for optimism in action, proving that one person's vision can move millions. Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we explore the stories, strategies, and insights of thought leaders who inspire us to think differently and lead better. Through candid conversations and expert perspectives, we dive into the challenges, breakthroughs, and practical lessons that shape exceptional leadership. Welcome to the program, Gabe.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Charles.
Love to always start with our listeners learning more about you and your background, and share a defining moment in your life that set you on the path to focusing on the best of humanity.
The one common thread that I've had throughout my life is that I like to get people to pay attention to something that I think matters, that feels good to look at, to pay attention to learn about. I've always had a mind for like trivia and sharing interesting facts and figures and helping my friends get their businesses off the ground. How do you get the signal to break through the noise? And so it's been a bit of a long journey to arrive at this place. I studied politics in college, and then I worked in the entertainment industry following graduation. Then I had a bit of a detour and played in a band and DJ'd in New York, as is kind of required, I think, sometimes to have a little bit of fun out there. Then took another detour down to South America, helped a friend launch a company there, an insurance company of all things, which was quite the challenge of how to get people to pay attention to that in a fun way. And then rejoined a company I had worked for before that evolved into having control over Upworthy, the brand. And I took over that brand about 5 or 6 years ago and built it into what it is today. But the commonality has just been, what am I doing? How can I get people to pay attention to it? And is it worth paying attention to? And so that has been the thing that has been a thread, particularly in my media experience, to always not lose sight of.
I notice on YouTube that you're also a trivia champion, right, in your past?
Yeah, I glossed over that.
Yes.
I am one of the top game show winners of all time.
Interesting side story, which maybe we'll get into later. Want to first kind of talk about Upworthy. It started as a viral content site, and its mission is really to shine a light on the best of humanity. Can you share a little bit more about the platform? Just give us more insight into Upworthy and really what it's designed to do.
Upworthy is a multimedia company, a brand that has existed for over a decade. I think a lot of people might remember it from its early version of populating people's Facebook feeds, sometimes credited with inventing clickbait. So sorry or not sorry, depending on who I'm talking to. But the mission has always been how to get people to realize that we're all part of the same story, how to put things out there that connect and elevate and uplift. That has changed over depending on what kind of medium that we're reaching people through. But the mission has been consistent to try to do it for the right reasons. And so we have a website, Upworthy.com, that has over 100 million page views a month. Our socials reach another 100 million people per month. The Facebook is still thriving. The Instagram page is huge. Our TikTok is huge, over 12 million followers total across platforms. And I think the best thing about it is they're there for the right reasons. You know, they're there to come together and to be exposed to stuff that will lower the temperature, to make them believe in humanity, to make them believe in each other themselves, and to find a little bit of inspiration that can sometimes be a little bit hard to come by in this media landscape.
I love that mission. And as the head of content and innovation at Upworthy, how has your role evolved since joining?
I have been with the company for the better part of a decade. I've worn a lot of hats. I've kind of slid in where I've needed to be as part of the leadership. And basically what I've done is to try to see where there's opportunity to get our message out in new and exciting ways. And so I've done everything from build up YouTube channels and video campaigns, performance on that side, to working with a variety of partners and brands, whether they be Fortune 500 companies or NGOs like the World Food Program, or even the United Nations, to try to further mission-oriented work as well. I think about 4 or 5 years ago or so, I recognized an opportunity in Instagram, which had been pretty much dormant and was used to just share updates about the company and, oh, here are the people who work here, which is nice. But I thought it could be something more, so I poured a lot of energy into building up that channel, which eventually led to building this wonderful community of just millions of followers and members who contribute, who comment, who share stories, built a wonderful, safe place for people to share and be vulnerable, to talk about their experiences in the world and, what it means to care about people, how people have cared for them, and to share a laugh or learn something in the process as well. And that evolved into the book. And now there are other things I'm trying to look to and solve as well.
Are there any key strategies that you have seen that really helps to keep the platform relevant? Because in this day and age, that's critical and it's so hard to do.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Charles. The social media landscape, and I even hesitate to even use the word social media because it's just media now. It's where the YouTube is outpacing any other vertical out there, and same with the amount of minutes spent on TikTok and Instagram. It's constantly evolving. So I think that the single most important thing in terms of trying to stay ahead of the curve or to recognize how to interact in the landscape is to look at how the environment actually functions and operate according to those rules, as opposed to saying, wow, I really wish it worked this way. I'm going to act like it does and then hope my message gets out there. And this changes every couple of years, how the platforms work. I would say, every couple of years or so, there's a seismic shift from curated content to original content to politics to not politics, depending on the powers that be and where things are headed. But looking at how things are functioning and being like, given these truths of how messages get out, how can I get my message to get out? Mine was one about the importance of human decency and togetherness and the shared human experience. But the way to go about that wouldn't have been to be really earnest, be like, I'm here to talk about this. Everyone should care about it, right? I had to recognize that attention spans are what they are. There is a need that people have at any particular moment. It may not be what my needs are, or it may coincide, and to identify that and then to answer the problem that people may have with whatever you're trying to reach them with.
And I have found that too from reading your stuff, being a follower. Some of the core strategies that I've noticed is you really are great at fostering interactive storytelling, integrating authenticity in everything that you publish, and responding quickly to shifts in platform algorithms, like you mentioned. Plus, you've done a great job of partnering with global organizations, experimenting with new tools, all of which I have seen keep you relevant and a trusted source of goodwill and keeps you relevant online, which is so hard to do these days. So how does Upworthy's user prompts shape the platform's direction, which I think is really unique to what you do?
Touching on something I just said about the idea of, answering a problem, providing a solution to a problem that people actually have. I think one of the constants there was that there was a lot of talking at people and not talking with people. And the platforms are built to have a back and forth. It's not just a place to distribute something that you made and you want to get people's eyeballs on. You have to, show some respect to the audience, that you want their input, you want to hear about their experience, and that there might be something that you can learn from them in the process. So for me, the genesis of building at Upworthy, because there were no followers beginning, and then within 6 months, there were over 1 million. I was lucky because I think the need that I had and the problem that I needed to answer, along with my co-creator, 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝗁, was something that other people were experiencing as well, which was, I wish that there were proof points of human decency out there on social media, a place I could go to and see that time and time again. And so it started as just answering that question for ourselves, building towards that, and then seeing it take off. As for the back and forth, there was a really interesting moment where we saw how people were interacting with it. We would share one thing, let's say be a story about a really nice story that was, screen capped from Reddit, because a couple years ago, everything would be curation in that way. You go over to Reddit or some other site and be like, oh, this looks like it'll do well on Instagram. Obviously, that's not exactly how things work anymore. But you would share that and people would be like, oh, this is great. That really reminds me about my teacher that I had in third grade. They write a story. Other people create this feedback loop and you start encouraging that. You interact with people around it. And it's the best thing because all of a sudden you start realizing that this number with a bunch of zeros after it that seems impossibly big is there are real people with real lived experiences behind it. And I think tapping into that curiosity, learning about them, giving them a place to share more led to some magic being able to happen and incidentally intersected with creating a channel, an account that had a lot of thriving engagement behind it.
I love what you said about a two-way dialogue with a lot of this social media, that it's just not you sharing, but inviting others to share with you and identifying a problem that resonates with so many. I love the questions that you have on the site. One example, what's the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for you? Because they aren't just content, they're community builders. And I have found that each prompt really invites so many people to respond, which in my case, from looking at it, would to me reveal maybe even some new themes or maybe overlooked topics when you go through those comments, correct?
You don't know where the thread is going to lead to, but it's just really great to see that there is a desire for people to share, particularly around something positive. Here's an experience. Here's a life that I led. Here's someone who left an impression on me. It feels good to get that recognition out there for people. And it feels good to do it in a space that a lot of that isn't necessarily happening. When we started this, really leaning into it, it was pretty novel. The idea of building a channel around, let's put it as like good vibes, right? Now you see a lot more of that. And I'm really glad that you do. Obviously, things are still extremely polarized, maybe more polarized than they were even at the height of the pandemic. But you also see a lot of people who recognize that you can reach people in positive ways. And that's a really nice thing to see. And like you said, you don't know what it's going to lead to, what story will lead to another thing and another thing, what connection will come from it. And that's bringing a little bit of the magic and beauty of just being alive to the digital landscape.
And it's so great that you offer a presence to make people feel better. Like you said, in today's society, yes, there's maybe more of that than what there used to be, but in my opinion, not near enough. And what I see is real people are sharing their real lived experiences and they're wanting to connect with others. Did that surprise you when you started it to see that and to see the responses you were getting? Or is it something you assumed would happen?
Really had no expectations as to what was going to happen and how people would react. I think I was pleasantly surprised to see the interactions that were happening and the stories that were shared. And it left me with a feeling of, I want more of that. This is a nice thing that's happening. How do we get more of that to happen? And so, when 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝗁 and I saw that taking place in the comments, we thought, okay, well, how can we be a little bit more intentional about giving people an opportunity to share? How can we be more intentional about sharing the things that are coming from it? Because that was another wonderful thing was the stories that people would put out there, they held a real power. You'd read it and you'd be like, wow, that's really nice. And then it would trigger a feeling in you about an experience that you had. And so we started asking more questions to the audience, getting more responses, thousands and thousands to particular questions. And then it was a different problem, right? Which was, well, what do we do with this? It's one thing to feed it back, to the platform and then just have it kind of live a 24-hour life cycle and have something beautiful lost to the avalanche of content and comments that people may never find again. Like, I wonder if you have ever had that experience where you saw something on the internet and you were like, oh, that was so good. Where was that? What did that person say? And you just can't find it again. And so that's why we ended up thinking, oh, this would be good to be preserved in a book. But we can probably have that conversation a little later.
We'll definitely get to the book. I want to also talk about that balance that I think you need to have between toxic positivity and framing these positive experiences within real world challenges.
Right.
Was that difficult for you, or were you mindful of that as you were selecting stories for the book and or just for the platform?
I'm very mindful of it, both personally and professionally. I think it's dangerous to create an environment where you're living with blinders on, whether that be in the real world or whether it be in a digital landscape where you say, no, things are good. Everything's good. Talking about things that are happening in the world between people at a small scale that are beautiful doesn't mean that there's not a lot of pain and suffering and horrible things. It's just an acknowledgement about the other side of the coin that's happening. It's important to give that some airplay because it's not an inherently dramatic thing most of the time that will command the kind of attention that when you're up against with the most dramatic things happening the world over at any moment, there's going to be a lot more attention grabbing stuff happening. But it speaks to something deep within the human spirit, which is there are small kindnesses happening. There are small, beautiful moments that stay with people and that deserve recognition. And it doesn't mean disavowing the pain that's in the world. Oftentimes, it means acknowledging it, because from horrible difficulties, loss, struggle, personal, professional, whatever it may be, come those intersections with the best of humanity or the best of yourself, right? So people can only read so many stories about a cute puppy or something, or watch cute puppy videos, and they serve their purpose and they're wonderful and I love them just like everyone does. But there is a similar feeling of fulfillment and nourishment that comes from acknowledging the truth of the human experience, which can be really, it can be painful, it can be beautiful, and oftentimes those things are inextricably intertwined.
Very well said. In your opinion, what's the biggest misconception about kindness or goodness in this digital age?
The biggest misconception, that's a great question, because I got to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's skeptical of it, which I often sometimes am in those shoes. But I think it's that it's boring. I think that kindness and goodness, true kindness and goodness, is the opposite of boring. It's a testament to the human spirit. And sometimes it's shown in really small ways, and something that is just a tiny thing that may not matter to anyone except you or the person receiving it. And sometimes it strikes a chord that can resonate throughout everyone and change the course of history. There's a lot of great religious traditions that are built upon the ideas of something that could be seen as boring. Be good to each other. Is that boring, or is it incredibly profound? And so I would say that there has been a lot of stories, a lot of experiences that have shown that no, this is not boring. And even if it's small, it can have great impact and great reach.
I asked a few people before our interview as well, just to get their thoughts, and they said they believe that kindness is superficial or weak online, easily drowned out by outrage and cynicism. But in reality, authentic stories of goodness are not only powerful, they're contagious. And the big misconception that I think of how it's being portrayed is that people become apathetic when exposed to positive news versus being continually engaged with it. By witnessing something, it mobilizes you to further kindness,
Hmm.
both online and offline, which I think you agree with, correct?
I think that's exactly right. It's like there is real meaning behind decency and kindness. It's called humanity, right? Showing humanity. I think that, repeated exposure to the awful things about humanity that command attention, they command headlines easily. And, a lot of times it's justified. But when that becomes everything that someone is exposed to, it can have some poisonous effects on the human spirit. The worst of which is disconnecting from your fellow people and being like, it's not worth fighting for. People aren't worth fighting for, and you get ground down and you don't want to make a difference. You don't want to address the whatever change that you may want to make in the world. And maybe this is why the youth has that fire in them, because they've spent less time being exposed to this stuff, and some people are able to hold on to it longer. But the trick is, making sure you are motivated and nourished, that you are taking in a diet of things that uplift you and make you feel that the world is worth fighting for. Because without that energy, how can you address the things that need to be addressed? And who benefits from that? Who benefits from people not having the energy to make the world a more equitable place among everyone, right?
Remember the old news slogan that if it bleeds, it leads, and negative news is predominantly shared. But a previous guest of the podcast, you said good news is shared twice as much as bad news. So for those trying to build their brand, being an influencer, whether it's a leader or professional, note that, because good news is contagious and more contagious than negative news, which we get a plethora of throughout all of our social feeds, I'm sure.
I've seen various studies around like what people share, what they don't, what's more likely. And I don't know where the data is behind it, but I should probably dive into this some more. But I think what people really look for, and can sometimes be equated with good news, is people are looking for someone or something to root for, right? They want to look at what you're doing and be like, hell yeah, I'm into that. And I'm glad that you're doing that. People are looking for heroes, big and small. And a lot of times that is good news. Like seeing somebody as small as, like, okay, I decided over the past couple months, I'm going to clean up as many streets as I can in the Bay Area as possible from trash and garbage, and show the difference and try to inspire people. Or I'm going to do X, Y, or Z and share it and see what happens. Or I'm just going to do it for myself because it feels good. I think that makes a difference personally. And I think when other people see it happening, that's like the definition of feeling uplifted. That's the definition of goodness. You're like, this makes me feel good. And I think that's one of the key differences when stuff is defined as good news and is shared widely versus stuff that might not, is that it taps into that feeling of empowerment and hope and optimism.
Those are so critical to move people to action. And I think that what you're doing with this platform in sharing this good news is mobilizing this and hopefully creating a larger and larger movement for this type of news. If Upworthy could launch one initiative without any constraints, what would you personally champion and why?
I think about this a lot, when I have the most faith in humanity. I'll take a little bit of a detour answering this question here. I believe that humanity can accomplish anything, right? If certain things are true. I think what needs to be true for humanity to overcome the greatest obstacles are infinite resources, money being unlocked, international cooperation between people, and an existential threat to existing structures. So if I had infinite money and I had unbelievable amounts of international cooperation, and there was an existential threat to humanity to address that people took seriously, what I would love to do, what I'd love to see, is just like a place where young people from every country could come together, have everything taken care of for them to solve the problems that we're faced with, and to communicate and to interact and to get to know each other. A couple people from every country get together, work on the world's biggest problems, and then take that energy and understanding back home. I think that would be a cool thing.
I would support that initiative myself. What advice would you give to aspiring positivity focused creators out there if they're building their brand around this? Are there lessons that you've learned or things that they should really focus on to really make an impact and make sure they're doing it for the right reasons?
Yeah, I mean, the right reason is rooted in honesty. Why are you trying to reach people? And how are you going to go about fulfilling on the reasons that you're trying to get in front of people? Choose kind of like something rooted around kindness and goodness and the human spirit, if that's authentic to the stories that you want to tell, because then that'll come across and it will be a really nice thing. But if it seems like it's a marketing ploy, then people, they can smell it from a mile away, right? And they'll discount it. So I think starting from that place of being like, okay, is this who I am, and is this what I want to get out there, is a really important question to ask. And then once you have that, okay, how is what I'm doing different than what other people are doing in this space? What is my unique perspective, my unique voice, my unique contribution around this? And it doesn't mean reinventing the wheel by any means. There are constants when it comes to telling those stories, but it means, okay, what is the way that I'm going to put this in front of people that's going to travel differently or provide a bit of a different perspective than folks may normally be exposed to.
Well, the world needs honest voices and fresh takes, especially when countering all the negativity that's out there. Let's move into the book now. And what inspired you and Lucia to compile these stories into this book, especially during a time when social media often amplifies the negativity and division?
We touched on it a little bit, which is we saw something special happening and it made us feel good and we wanted to preserve it. When you see people responding to a story that you've shared with a story of their own and it strikes a chord in you, there's a little bit of sadness that comes with knowing that it's going to be an ephemeral thing that's just lost on the internet. It's kind of on the internet, it's a place where sometimes bad stuff goes to live forever. You've done something wrong and it is going to be up there for a very long time. But if there's something good that smaller that you've shared in a comment or helped someone, it's probably not going to command the same attention. And so we wanted to take those stories and preserve them in a way that would last forever. And so a book was the kind of natural kind of pathway to doing that. At the same time, we also recognize that there is a lot of toxicity online. And, we're really proud that Upworthy and everything else that we do has kind of provided a refuge from that. But it is still a refuge. People are, you get off of it, you go somewhere else, you're going to be drawn into the siren call of trolls and exes and whatever it may be, and comparison culture and that kind of stuff. And we're like, since these stories have a real power, when you read them, you feel better. Is there a way that we can kind of preserve that feeling, like to bottle and preserve it as well? And since the science behind it isn't quite up to snuff for us to synthesize the Upworthy chemical yet, we thought that putting it into a book form where at least you could take a story, read it a page here, a page there, and sit with that feeling and carry it with you and not be drawn back into the infinite scroll to replace it was a great place to start.
Well, it's a solution to what you said earlier, too, that when you see something uplifting, positive, you usually forget where it's located. You don't earmark it, but this is 101 stories you can turn to again and again that will serve as a resource for comfort. Each page designed, which I love this, to reassure you that people more often than not are good at heart. Such a positive message, and such a message that's really needed these days. Many stories, though, in the book highlight just small acts of kindness with lasting ripple effects. What surprised you most about these everyday moments?
I think you've said it. It's the lasting effect that something so small can have on somebody. It was a common thread that we saw again and again, which was, it may have been the tiniest interaction. I think a lot of times people think changing someone's life requires a grand gesture, paying off their college or pulling them out of a burning car accident or something like that. And we have stories like that in there that obviously hit that mark. But sometimes it's just a passing word, a kind gesture, a hug at the right moment, at the right time, that creates a completely different way of looking at the world for the person who received it. So it was really empowering to see that happening so consistently. And I say empowering because with understanding that your words and your actions with somebody in the real world can make such a big difference for them, it comes with a real sense of agency. When you're out there moving about the world and you see someone and you say something, or you're there for someone, or you pick up the phone and you call, someone that you've been thinking about, nobody has control over that. There's no algorithm dictating who you're coming across with when you walk out the door. There's no talking head saying that this is, the opinion that you should have in the moment. There's no moderating forces at work dictating who and what and how you should communicate. Right? It's just you and the world and the people in it. And I think seeing that is a great feeling, because that you can, at any given moment, interaction that you may have with somebody may be the thing that stays with them forever.
Great insight there. And you're right. These weren't grand gestures. They were small, sometimes unnoticed, but their emotional impact could carry on for years, which should provide everyone hope that, like you said, you don't have to pay off someone's college tuition or save them from a burning car. Small acts of kindness make a difference, and even at their most ordinary, they leave a legacy. I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.